Edit. If Earth cannot defend itself, then Earth does not deserve a vote. The words landed in the Galactic Council chamber like a door slamming shut. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then the laughter started. It rolled across the vast amphitheater in waves, echoing beneath crystal arches and holographic banners representing hundreds of worlds. Some delegates laughed politely. Others did not bother hiding their amusement. High Counselor Veyron sat at the center dais with his hands folded, watching the reactions spread through the room. Behind him, a massive display showed the military assets of every recognized civilization in Council space. Fleet after fleet filled the screen. Thousands of warships, endless formations of destroyers, carriers, and dreadnoughts. Then came Earth. The display shifted. 18 cargo vessels. For escort ships. No battleships. No carriers. No heavy cruisers. The chamber erupted again. That is their fleet, one delegate asked. Those are freighters, another replied. I have seen larger security convoys protecting grain shipments. More laughter followed. Ambassador Daniel Mercer sat alone at the Terran delegation table. He looked nothing like the military commanders surrounding him. Gray suit, white shirt, coffee growing cold beside a stack of reports. He glanced up at the screen for less than a second before writing something in a small paper notebook. Not a tablet, not a datapad. Paper. Counselor Veyron noticed. Ambassador Mercer, he said, smiling. Surely you understand the concern. The Council cannot allow vulnerable civilizations to create instability. Protection requires responsibility. Daniel capped his pen. Of course. Several delegates exchanged confused looks. They had expected outrage. Maybe an argument. At least some pride. Instead, they got two calm words. Veyron leaned forward. Then you agree that Earth lacks the capability to secure its own territory? Daniel looked at the giant display again. The image showed the 18 cargo ships drifting near the edge of Sol space. Old hulls. Unremarkable silhouettes. Nothing impressive. Nothing threatening. No, Daniel said quietly. I did not say that. The chamber fell silent for a beat. Then someone laughed again. Come on. A delegate from the Karth Dominion called out. Those ships move freight. More laughter followed. Daniel took a sip of coffee. They do. Then why are they listed as military assets? Another asked. Because they belong to us. That answer somehow made the room laugh even harder. Veyron smiled as if the debate were already over. The Council will proceed with the Protective Oversight Resolution tomorrow morning. Once approved, Earth's border security will be administered by the Council fleet. The vote was supposed to be a formality. Everybody knew it. Daniel closed his notebook and stood. Then I suppose we will all learn something tomorrow. Veyron raised an eyebrow. And what would that be? Daniel gathered his papers and slipped them into a worn leather briefcase. Whether appearances matter as much as everyone thinks. Without another word, he walked toward the exit while laughter followed him across the chamber. Nobody noticed that he never looked embarrassed. Nobody noticed that he never argued. And nobody noticed that, far beyond the Council station, 18 ordinary-looking cargo ships had just received the same encrypted message from Earth Command. Edit. The news cycle across Council space moved fast, but not fast enough to ignore what had happened inside the chamber. By the time Daniel Mercer stepped off the diplomatic tram and entered the Terran embassy compound, clips of the vote were already spreading across 1,000 worlds. Commentators replayed the laughter. Analysts zoomed in on the fleet display. Comedians were making jokes about Earth using delivery ships as a national defense strategy. Daniel dropped his briefcase onto the conference table and loosened his tie. A large screen on the far wall immediately filled with familiar faces. Admiral Rachel Donovan appeared first. Beside her sat Secretary of Defense Michael Grant and Fleet Logistics Director Samuel Brooks. None of them looked upset. If anything, they looked mildly annoyed at having their evening interrupted. You handled that better than I would have, Donovan said. I was tempted, Daniel admitted. For about 5 seconds. Brooks chuckled. 5 seconds is a personal record. Daniel poured himself a fresh cup of coffee. How bad is the coverage? Grant tapped a control panel. Several headlines appeared. Earth exposed as military lightweight. Council prepares oversight of human territory. Terran fleet described as obsolete. Daniel stared at the screen. They really love the word obsolete. They always do, Brooks replied. Right before they learn something expensive. A few smiles appeared around the table. Then the room settled into business. Donovan leaned forward. The council inspection team launches in 6 hours. Admiral Karvek will personally lead it. Daniel nodded. We expected that. He is thorough, Grant said. That is what worries me. No, Brooks answered. What worries me is that he is smart enough to notice things. For the first time, the room grew quiet. Everyone understood what he meant. The plan depended on people seeing exactly what they expected to see. Human cargo vessels, freight containers, maintenance crews, shipping records. Nothing more. Daniel walked toward the window overlooking the station. Thousands of lights stretched across the artificial skyline. Somewhere beyond them, reporters were still laughing. Do you ever wonder if we should have told them? He asked. Donovan folded her arms. Told them what? The truth. Brooks shook his head immediately. The truth kept the peace for 40 years because nobody knew it. Daniel could not argue with that. He remembered studying the old records as a young diplomat. The debates. The close calls. The leaders who decided that the safest weapon was the one nobody thought existed. A soft chime interrupted the meeting. A secure transmission appeared on the screen. Earth Command authorization confirmed. Encrypted fleet message delivered. Donovan glanced at the notification and smiled. Well, she said, that part is done. Daniel looked back. Any response? Only one line. What did they send? Donovan read directly from the report. All 18 vessels acknowledge receipt. Operational readiness remains unchanged. Daniel laughed quietly. Of course that is all they said. Outside the embassy window, the stars of the station reflected against the glass. Somewhere out there, Admiral Karvek was preparing his inspection team. Somewhere out there, reporters were preparing tomorrow's headlines. And somewhere beyond the edge of council space, 18 unremarkable ships continued drifting exactly where everyone expected them to be, carrying a secret that had remained hidden longer than most civilizations had existed. Edit. Admiral Karvek had expected many things when he accepted the inspection assignment. Resistance, excuses, political theater. What he did not expect was boredom. The first cargo vessel looked exactly like every document claimed. The second looked the same. So did the third. Endless cargo bays, maintenance corridors, storage decks, civilian navigation systems. If Earth was hiding something, it was doing an impressive job of hiding it behind paperwork. Karvek stepped off another inspection shuttle and onto the deck of the vessel Horizon Star. A human dock supervisor greeted him with a clipboard in hand. Not a datapad, a clipboard. The admiral stared at it for a moment. Is that an actual piece of paper? He asked. The supervisor smiled. Yes, sir. Why? Because nobody has ever hacked paper. Several members of Karvek's team exchanged amused looks. The admiral did not. He had spent 3 decades investigating military deception. Sometimes the smallest details mattered. Continue the tour, he said. For the next 2 hours they examined engineering sections, cargo manifests, maintenance records, and crew quarters. Everything matched perfectly. Too perfectly. That was the problem. Karvek stopped beside a large observation window overlooking a cargo bay stacked with hundreds of sealed containers. How long have these ships operated? He asked. Some of them nearly 40 years, the supervisor answered. They have excellent reliability ratings. And no major upgrades? Routine modernization. Nothing special. Karvek nodded slowly. The answer sounded reasonable. Every answer sounded reasonable. That was beginning to bother him. Later that afternoon, he sat inside a temporary operations center reviewing inspection reports. His deputy, Commander Talek, dropped a stack of files onto the table. Everything is clean, Talek said. Every vessel passed. I know. Then why do you look disappointed? Karvek leaned back in his chair. Because Ambassador Mercer knew we were coming. Of course he did. And yet he never seemed concerned. Talek shrugged. Perhaps humans are simply stubborn. Perhaps. But Karvek was not convinced. He opened another report. Energy consumption logs appeared across the screen. Numbers. Charts. Technical readouts. At first glance nothing seemed unusual. Then he frowned. That cannot be right. Talek looked over. What? Karvek pointed at the figures. These vessels consume nearly 12 times the power expected for ships this size. Talek blinked. Are the readings accurate? Multiple sources confirm them. Then where is the energy going? That was exactly the question. Karvek enlarged the data. Life support systems were normal. Navigation systems were normal. Communications were normal. Everything appeared ordinary. Yet the total energy draw remained absurdly high. Talek folded his arms. Maybe their engineers are inefficient. Humans are many things, Karvek said quietly. Inefficient is not one of them. Several hours later, the admiral presented his findings to a council review committee. The response was immediate. Dismissal. You are overthinking this, one council member said. They are cargo ships. The inspection found nothing, said another. Earth is attempting to appear mysterious because they know they are weak. Laughter followed. Karvek remained silent until the meeting ended. As the room emptied, he looked once more at the energy reports glowing on the screen. Somewhere in those numbers was an answer. He could feel it. He just could not see it yet. And far away, inside the Terran embassy, Daniel Mercer received a short message from Earth Command. He read it once, smiled faintly, and locked his screen. The message contained only 4 words. Inspection proceeding as planned. Edit. You are chasing a ghost, Admiral. Counselor Veyron sounded amused as his image flickered above the conference table. The inspection is complete. The vote is tomorrow. There is nothing left to investigate. Admiral Karvek stared at the energy reports spread across his display. Perhaps. That does not sound convincing. Because the numbers still do not make sense. A few council members exchanged looks. One of them sighed. We have already reviewed this. Human ships are old. Their systems are inefficient. Karvek resisted the urge to argue. He had learned long ago that facts rarely won against assumptions people enjoy believing. Understood, he said. Then I will submit my final report. The meeting ended moments later. The instant the connection closed, Commander Talek looked across the room. You do not agree with them. No, then why stop? Karvek turned toward the massive viewport overlooking the station. Hundreds of ships drifted through the darkness beyond the glass. Merchants, couriers, patrol craft, routine traffic. The kind of scene he had witnessed thousands of times. Because I do not have evidence, he answered. Only instinct. Talek frowned. Your instincts have kept you alive for 30 years. Instincts do not survive committee reviews. Back at the Terran embassy, Daniel Mercer sat alone in his office. Most of the building had gone quiet for the evening. A half-finished cup of coffee sat beside his desk. Outside, the station lights reflected across the window like distant stars. His terminal chimed softly. Another media report. Another discussion panel. Another analyst explaining why Earth could not possibly defend itself. Daniel muted the audio after 10 seconds. A knock came at the door. Come in. Admiral Rachel Donovan appeared carrying a tablet. Thought you might want to see this. Daniel glanced up. Good news or bad news? Depends how much you enjoy irony. She handed him the report. It contained a transcript from a closed council security briefing. Several officials had begun discussing post-vote plans for administering Terran border regions. Some were already debating which sectors would receive permanent council patrols. Daniel shook his head slowly. They have not even passed the resolution yet. Nope. They are already dividing responsibilities. Donovan smiled. Confidence is a powerful thing. Daniel leaned back in his chair. Overconfidence is even more powerful. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Donovan tapped another section of the report. This part is interesting. Daniel read silently. One sentence immediately caught his attention. Border activity increasing in the outer frontier. Several independent pirate groups observed massing near Terran shipping lanes. His expression changed. That is sooner than expected. We thought they would wait. So did I. Donovan folded her arms. What do you think they see? Daniel looked toward the stars beyond the glass. Opportunity. The next morning, while council delegates prepared for the final vote, a very different meeting was taking place thousands of light years away. Deep in the outer frontier, multiple pirate captains gathered aboard a neutral trade station. They studied maps of Terran territory, shipping routes, cargo schedules, fleet movements. One captain pointed toward the latest intelligence report and laughed. Look at this. Another leaned closer. 18 cargo ships. That is their entire response force. Several voices joined the laughter. To them, Earth looked exposed, vulnerable, easy. And as the meeting continued, nobody noticed that every conclusion they reached depended on one assumption. The assumption that those ships were exactly what they appeared to be. Edit. The emergency alert reached the council chamber 12 minutes before the vote was scheduled to begin. At first, most delegates ignored it. Emergency alerts happened every day somewhere in council space. Border disputes, navigation failures, Trade disagreements. Nothing unusual. Then the location appeared on the main display. Terran Frontier Colony 7. The room gradually grew quiet. Counselor Veyron glanced toward his staff. What happened? An aide checked the incoming reports. Multiple unidentified vessels entered the system approximately 2 hours ago. Local authorities believe they belong to independent pirate organizations. Several delegates exchanged uneasy looks. Piracy was common near the outer frontier, but rarely on this scale. The screen updated again. Estimated hostile force, 82 ships. Veyron raised an eyebrow. That is larger than expected. Yes, Counselor. Has Earth requested assistance? The aide hesitated. No, a few delegates laughed softly. Pride, someone muttered. Or denial. Across the chamber, Daniel Mercer sat quietly at the Terran table. He read the same report everyone else could see. He did not look surprised. He did not look angry. If anything, he looked tired. Counselor Veyron noticed. Ambassador Mercer, he called out. You seem remarkably calm given the circumstances. Daniel glanced up. Should I not be? Your colony is facing a significant threat. That happens sometimes. The answer earned several confused looks. Veyron folded his hands. The Council fleet remains available if Earth wishes to request protection. Daniel nodded politely. We appreciate the offer. But we already sent help. The room immediately focused on him. Help? Veyron asked. Daniel opened a small folder and checked a document. 18 ships departed approximately 90 minutes ago. A few delegates struggled not to smile. The freighters? One asked. Yes. Laughter spread through the chamber again. Even some neutral observers joined in. 82 pirate vessels against 18 cargo carriers was not a serious military response. It sounded like a logistical error. Veyron leaned back in his chair. Ambassador, perhaps now would be an appropriate time to reconsider the resolution. Daniel closed the folder. Why? Because your colony may require immediate military support. We will see. The confidence in his voice felt strangely out of place. Not arrogant. Not defensive. Just certain. Hours later, deep inside Terran space, the civilian population of Frontier Colony 7 watched events unfold through public broadcasts. Store owners closed early. Families gathered around screens. Local officials monitored emergency channels. Nobody knew exactly what would happen next. Among them sat Governor Helen Cross inside the Colony Administration Center. A young aide approached her desk. The fleet arrived. Helen looked up immediately. Already? Yes, ma'am. Visual confirmation? The aide nodded. All 18 vessels. Helen exhaled slowly. The room around her remained tense. Several advisors looked worried. One finally spoke. Do you think it will be enough? Helen stared at the display showing the incoming Terran ships. Long rectangular hulls. Cargo markings. Weathered paint. The same vessels people had been mocking for years. I honestly do not know, she admitted. Then her terminal chimed. A secure message had arrived from Earth Command. Helen opened it. She read the contents once, then twice. A small smile appeared. Governor? The aide asked. What does it say? Helen looked back toward the fleet display. It says we should keep broadcasting. Why? Her smile widened slightly. Because somebody wants the whole galaxy watching what happens next. Edit. The first transmission arrived from the pirate fleet exactly 23 minutes after the Terran ships entered the system. It appeared simultaneously on public broadcasts, council networks, and civilian channels across the colony. The pirate leader sat comfortably in his command chair, smiling as though the outcome had already been decided. This is Captain Raxer of the Free Frontier Coalition, he announced. We are prepared to accept your surrender immediately. Power down your vessels, and no further inconvenience will occur. Millions of people watched the message. In the council chamber, several delegates looked toward Daniel Mercer. Counselor Veyron almost seemed sympathetic now. Ambassador, he said quietly, it is not too late to request assistance. Daniel did not answer right away. He simply checked the time on his wristwatch. No, he said. I think they have it covered. Veyron frowned. Covered? Before Daniel could elaborate, a new transmission appeared on every screen. The response came from the lead Terran vessel. There was no dramatic speech. No threats. No patriotic music. Just a woman sitting in a plain command chair, wearing a standard fleet uniform. Captain Laura Bennett looked more like an airline pilot than a military officer. She glanced down at her console before speaking. Captain Raxer, This is Terran Vessel Meridian Star. Request denied. The pirate captain blinked. Denied. Correct. You are refusing surrender? Yes. The response was so calm that several council delegates thought there had been a translation error. Raxer laughed. Do you understand the situation? Bennett nodded. We do. You are outnumbered. We know. You are protecting a colony with cargo ships. Bennett looked off-screen for a second, as though confirming something with her crew. That is technically true. Even Daniel smiled slightly at that answer. Raxer spread his arms dramatically. Then why are you still here? For the first time, Captain Bennett paused. Because leaving would create paperwork. A few humans watching the broadcast laughed out loud. Most aliens looked confused. The pirate captain certainly did. Paperwork. A lot of paperwork. She sighed. Trust me, nobody wants that. Back in the council chamber, several delegates exchanged puzzled looks. Nothing about the conversation felt normal. There should have been fear, tension, negotiation. Instead, it sounded like two people discussing a delayed shipping order. Admiral Karvek sat silently near the rear of the chamber. Unlike the others, he was not watching the conversation. He was watching telemetry data. His eyes narrowed. There, he whispered. Commander Talek looked over. What? Karvek pointed toward a cluster of energy readings. The power consumption. Talek studied the numbers. Then his expression changed. It is increasing. Rapidly. Across the colony, Governor Helen Cross watched the same data appear on a secure military feed. One by one, all 18 Terran vessels began drawing enormous amounts of energy, far more than any cargo ship should ever require. Engineers throughout the system noticed it. Analysts noticed it. Even council technicians noticed it. And for the first time since the crisis began, nobody was laughing anymore. Edit. Admiral Karvek stood so quickly that his chair nearly tipped over. Magnify Section 14, he ordered. Council technicians immediately expanded the telemetry feed across the chamber. The numbers were impossible to ignore now. Every Terran vessel was drawing power levels normally associated with heavy industrial stations, not cargo carriers. Commander Talek stared at the display. How did we miss this? We did not miss it, Karvek replied quietly. We noticed it. We simply accepted the wrong explanation. Across the system, Captain Laura Bennett sat calmly on the bridge of the Meridian Star while dozens of indicators shifted from green to blue. Her executive officer glanced over from the operations console. Final authorization confirmed. Bennett nodded. About time. You seem relieved. I am. Keeping this secret for 10 years has been exhausting. A few crew members laughed. On public broadcasts, viewers watched the Terran ships continue drifting in formation. Nothing dramatic happened. No speeches. No warnings. Just 18 aging vessels holding position. Pirate Captain Raxer appeared increasingly confused. What exactly are you doing? He demanded through the open channel. Bennett checked another status report. Maintenance. Maintenance. A lot of maintenance. Right now, you would be surprised how much maintenance these ships require. Inside the council chamber, several delegates were beginning to look uncomfortable. The confidence from earlier had vanished. Even Councillor Veyron seemed uncertain. Ambassador Mercer, he said carefully. Is there something you would like to explain? Daniel looked up from his notebook. Not particularly. The energy readings suggest otherwise. Daniel considered that for a moment. Fair point. Every eye in the chamber turned toward him. Then perhaps you can tell us what those vessels actually are. Daniel closed the notebook and folded his hands. Cargo ships. Groans echoed throughout the room. Do not do that, Veyron snapped. I am being serious. So am I. Daniel shrugged. They transport cargo. Technically, it was true. The problem was that nobody trusted his answers anymore. Back near Frontier Colony 7, Governor Helen Cross watched secure military feeds unavailable to the public. One screen displayed the civilian broadcast. Another showed classified Terran telemetry. The difference was staggering. Hidden systems were activating throughout all 18 vessels. Massive internal structures were unfolding behind armored bulkheads. Entire compartments listed as storage areas were transforming into something else entirely. An aide standing beside her shook his head in disbelief. How long have those systems been there? Helen smiled faintly. Longer than I have been alive. And nobody knew? Very few people. Back on the bridge of the Meridian Star, a notification finally appeared on Bennett's console. She read it once and smiled. There it is. Her executive officer looked over. The last lock. The last lock. He leaned back in his chair. I have waited years to hear those words. Bennett opened a channel to the rest of the Terran formation. 18 captains appeared on the display. Some looked excited. Others looked relieved. One captain raised a coffee mug toward the camera. Bennett smiled. Ladies and gentlemen, authorization has been granted. Let us remind the galaxy why appearances can be misleading. Edit. For several long seconds, nothing happened. The galaxy watched. The pirates watched. The council watched. 18 ordinary-looking ships floated in formation near Frontier Colony 7, while billions of viewers waited for something dramatic. Then the external cameras began showing changes that nobody had expected. Large cargo panels slowly shifted position. Entire sections of the hull unfolded with mechanical precision. Structures that inspectors had labeled as freight handling equipment revealed completely different functions. Additional sensor arrays extended into open space. Communications systems expanded. Navigation architecture transformed. The ships were not becoming warships. They were becoming something far more complicated. Admiral Karvek leaned forward. Pause that feed. The image froze. Enhance Section 22. Technicians obeyed immediately. A closer view appeared. Karvek stared at it for several seconds before finally speaking. Those are not cargo support frameworks. Commander Talek swallowed. What are they? Modular deployment systems. Around the chamber, confused murmurs spread. Counselor Veyron looked irritated. Explain. Karvek never took his eyes off the screen. The ships were designed with multiple configurations. Cargo transport was only one of them. Silence followed. Back on the Meridian Star, Captain Laura Bennett watched status indicators turn green one after another. Her executive officer smiled. All systems synchronized. Good. Public reaction is interesting. How bad? Half the galaxy thinks this is a bluff. Bennett laughed softly. Only half. Across the pirate formation, Captain Raxer no longer looked amused. He sat staring at incoming scans. Run another analysis. His sensor officer nodded nervously. Already did. Then run it again. The results are unchanged. That is impossible. Yet the numbers remained exactly the same. The Terran ships now possessed sensor coverage, electronic warfare capability, communications range, and operational flexibility that exceeded anything expected from civilian freighters. They still looked like cargo vessels. Technically, they still were cargo vessels. But suddenly everyone understood they had been looking at the wrong category. Governor Helen Cross watched the feeds from colony headquarters and smiled for the first time in days. An advisor beside her shook his head. All these years. Yep. People really believed they were just shipping companies. That was the idea. Meanwhile, Daniel Mercer sat quietly at the Terran delegation table while the atmosphere inside the council chamber changed completely. Nobody was laughing now. Nobody was making jokes about obsolete fleets. Delegates were reviewing old reports, old inspections, old assumptions. One realization after another spread through the room. Earth had never argued. Earth had never protested. Earth had never tried to convince anyone it was stronger than it looked. It had simply allowed everyone else to reach their own conclusions. Counselor Veyron finally looked toward Daniel. You let us believe it. Daniel nodded. Believe what? That your fleet was insignificant. Daniel considered the question for a moment. No, he folded his notebook shut. We let you believe appearances were the same thing as reality. Edit. 3 days later, the vote never happened. Nobody officially canceled it. Nobody stood up and admitted they had been wrong. The resolution simply disappeared from the schedule as if it had never existed. That was how large institutions handled embarrassment. They buried it under paperwork and hoped history would lose interest. Unfortunately for them, the galaxy had been watching. Every major network replayed the recordings. Every analyst produced new theories. Every military academy suddenly wanted copies of Terran fleet doctrine. The question was no longer whether Earth could defend itself. The question was how many other assumptions might also be wrong. Inside the council chamber, the atmosphere felt very different from the one Daniel Mercer had walked into a few days earlier. Nobody laughed when he entered now. Nobody made jokes about cargo vessels. Several delegates actually stood to greet him. Daniel found that far more uncomfortable than the insults had been. Admiral Karvek approached him near the exit. I owe you an apology. Daniel looked surprised. For what? I inspected every ship personally. You did. And I still failed to understand what I was looking at. Daniel smiled faintly. That happens to all of us. Karvek studied him for a moment. You could have revealed everything years ago. Yes. Why did you not? Daniel glanced through the massive observation window overlooking the stars. Because most people become nervous when they see power. And hiding it changes that. Sometimes. Karvek folded his arms. That sounds dangerously optimistic. Maybe. Daniel shrugged. But my species learned a long time ago that constantly proving how strong you are usually creates more problems than it solves. The Admiral considered that answer carefully. For the first time, he realized something important. Earth had never built its strategy around fear. It had built its strategy around restraint. Later that evening, the 18 vessels began their journey home. Public broadcasts followed them as they crossed the edge of Terran space. To most viewers, they still looked ordinary. Long rectangular hulls, cargo markings, weathered paint, nothing glamorous, nothing intimidating. Yet somehow they seemed different now. Not because the ships had changed, because people finally understood they had never really seen them before. Back in his office, Daniel received one final message from Governor Helen Cross. It contained a simple photograph. Children were playing in a park beneath the artificial sky of Frontier Colony 7. Stores were open. Families were walking the streets. Life had returned to normal. Daniel stared at the image for several seconds before setting his tablet down. After everything that had happened, that photograph mattered more than any council vote, more than any military secret, more than any political victory. Because in the end, strength was never about winning arguments or impressing strangers. It was about making sure ordinary people could wake up tomorrow and live their lives in peace. And perhaps that was the lesson the galaxy needed most. The most dangerous people are not the ones who constantly remind everyone how powerful they are. The most dangerous people are the ones who have power, understand it completely, and still choose not to use it unless they absolutely must.